This is going to be part 3 of my Steiner and the Goddess series, and all this episode is going to be from the search for the new Isis, which is GA202 in the Rudolf Steiner archive. So he's talking about the modern Isis, the divine Sophia, and he's going to be discussing a lot of Egyptian mythology in this. And he was looking for a renewal of the mysteries, because the goddess seemed to have lost her meaning to people. She's not lost her way, we've lost her way with her. So he writes, in mythology, Osiris was regarded as a primeval ruler of Egypt, who brought the Egyptians the most important of their arts, who ruled in Egypt throughout long ages, who also travelled from Egypt into other lands, and not by the sword but by persuasion brought them the benefits of the arts taught in Egypt. During his absence on journeys, as he conferred on other lands the benefits with which he had instructed the Egyptians, Typhon, his wicked brother, introduced innovations into his own land of Egypt. And then when Osiris returned, he was slain by Typhon, despite the watchfulness of his consort Isis. I'm just going to interject here. To many people this is Set, or Seth is Typhon, but Steiner calls him that for some reason, and I've still not been able to find anyone that can explain to me why he calls him Typhon. So Steiner continues. Then Isis sought everywhere for Osiris. Through boys, so the legend says, it was revealed to her that the coffin had been carried away by the sea. She discovered it in Babylos, in Phoenicia, and brought it back to Egypt. Typhon cut up the corpse into 14 pieces. Isis collected the pieces with the use of her spices, and by other means she was able to give each piece the appearance of Osiris again. She then persuaded the priests to accept a third of the land from her, and by being in possession of a third of the land on the one hand, they should keep the grave of Osiris secret, and on the other hand introduce the Osiris cult, a service in remembrance of the ancient time of Osiris, to keep the memory alive that there had once been a different perception in humanity. This memory was to be preserved from that time on, and all sorts of secrets surrounded it. The time in which Typhon had slain Osiris was indicated to be the time in the November days of autumn, when the sun sets in the 17th degree of Scorpio, and opposite in Taurus the moon appears in the Pleiades as the full moon. Then it was related that Osiris once more went from the underworld, where he ruled over the dead and judged them, to the upper world in order to instruct his son Horus, whom he had had by Isis. It is further related by the legend that Isis let herself be induced to set free Typhon, whom she had held imprisoned. I'm going to just interject here. Now, I've always found that quite interesting, that she released the man, or the god, that killed her husband and her brother. So there's an element of forgiveness here. You know, one has to learn to forgive those that do wrong against us, and hopefully those that did the wrong against us understand why they did their wrong, and can understand their wrongdoing, and look at themselves. And forgiveness is a big thing in spiritual paths, soulful paths. We can't be holding on to grudges, because they hold us back. So Isis had to forgive the man, the perpetrator, that killed her husband. So continuing with Rudolf Steiner. Her son Horus, instructed by Osiris, grew so angry at this that he came in conflict with Isis's mother and seized the crown from her. Then it is related that either he himself, or in other versions, Hermes set cow horns upon her head in place of the crown, and since then she has been portrayed with these. Now you see Isis in ancient Egyptian myth standing there at the side of Osiris. And for the feeling of the ancient Egyptians, she was not only a mysterious deity, a mysterious spiritual being who stood in inner relation with the way that the world was ordered, but one could say that Isis was the epitome of all the deepest thoughts the Egyptians were able to form about the archetypal forces working in nature and in human beings. If the Egyptians were to look up to the great mysteries in his surroundings, then he had to look up to Isis, who had a statue in the temple at Sais, which has become famous. Beneath this statue, as is well known, was written the inscription that was intended to express the being of Isis. I am the All, I am the past, the present and the future. No mortal has yet lifted my vow. And I'm going to interject here, and this is one of the great mysteries of life, that no mortal has ever lifted Isis's vow. Because if one lifts the vow of Isis, one can see the reality of everything, when really we're all, as Gurdjieff talks about, we've got that Kunda buffer, we had that Kunda buffer that made us see life topsy-turvy, and when it was taken away from us, we still can continue to see life topsy-turvy. We were programmed to look at it that way. Well, if we can work through these mysteries and lift that veil, then that veil of Isis, then we will be able to see life for what it really is, what's really out there. Steiner continues, that was a central idea, particularly in the later period of the Egyptian civilization. And in gazing at the mysteries of Isis, a person remembered the other mysteries of the ancient time of Osiris. And in connection with Isis, at the sight of whom the pious Egyptian trembled when he let the words work upon him, I am the All, I am the past, the present and the future, no mortal has yet lifted my vow. When these words worked upon him, the Egyptian remembered at the same time that Isis was once united with Osiris, when he still wandered upon the earth. The laity saw it as a legend. In the mysteries, the priests explained that the ancient period of Osiris was the time in which the old clairvoyants united human beings with the spirit of nature all about him. And I'm just going to interject here that in the ancient times, the gods walked on this earth, and the humans that lived at that time were able to converse with the gods. The gods put forth all the ideas and the thoughts, and the humans worked with them. Steiner continues, for an understanding of the Osiris-Isis legend or myth in our time, one must view it with the feelings that were in the soul and in the heart of an Egyptian. We did so in a brief characteristic outline to begin with, and through these characteristics we must view with our soul what once sounded over from ancient times into more recent times, which lost its meaning through the mystery of Golgotha, but the riddle of which must be revealed again today, precisely for the better understanding of the mystery of Golgotha. There must stand before our soul's gaze all that mystery at first could only be divined when the Egyptian experienced the words that described Isis. I am the All, I am the past, the present and the future. No mortal has yet lifted my vow. For, my dear friends, we will contrast this Osiris-Isis myth with quite another Osiris-Isis myth. And in telling about this other Osiris-Isis myth, I must count upon your freedom from prejudice, your impartiality in the highest degree, so that you do not misunderstand it. This other Osiris-Isis myth is in no way born out of foolish ignorance or arrogance. It is born in humility. It is also of such a nature that perhaps it can only be related today in a most imperfect way, but I will try to characterize its main points in a few words. It is in the first instance left to each person to determine the period in which this Osiris-Isis myth, which I can only relate today approximately, even superficially, will be told. But as I said, I will try to tell this other Osiris-Isis myth, disregarding as much as possible many prejudices and calling upon your unbiased understanding. This other Osiris-Isis myth then roughly goes as follows. It was in the age of profound scientific knowledge, in the country of Bulgaria. Upon a hill in spiritual seclusion was erected a building, which was considered to be very remarkable in the country of Bulgaria. If one wanted to use the language of Goethe, one could say that the building represented an open secret, for the building was closed to none, it was open to all, and in fact everyone can see it at convenient times. But by far the greatest number of people saw nothing at all. By far the greatest number of people saw neither what was built nor what it represented. By far the greatest number of people stood, to use Goethe's words again, before an open secret, a completely open secret. A statue was intended to be the focus of the building. This statue showed a group of beings, the representative of humanity, then luciferic and Ahrimanic figures. People looked at the statue and did not know in the age of profound scientific knowledge in the country of Bulgaria that the statue, in fact, was only the vow for an invisible statue. But the invisible statue was not noticed by people, for it was the new Isis, the Isis of a new age. Some few people in the country of profound scientific knowledge had once heard of this remarkable connection between what was visible and what was, in the image of Isis, concealed behind what was open and evident. And then, in their profound allegorical and symbolical manner of speech, they asserted that this combination of the representative of humanity with Lucifer and Ahriman signified Isis. With this word signified, however, they not only ruined the artistic intention underlying the whole thing, for an artistic creation does not merely signify something, but is something, but they completely misunderstood all that underlay it. For it was completely off the point to say that the figures signified something. They already were what they appeared to be. And behind the figures was not an abstract new Isis, but an actual, real new Isis. The figures signified nothing at all, but they were in fact in themselves that which they made themselves out to be. But they possessed the peculiar feature that behind them there was a real being, the new Isis. Some few who in special circumstances, in special moments, had nevertheless seen this new Isis, found that she is asleep. And so we can say that the real underlying statue that conceals itself behind the external statue is the sleeping new Isis, a sleeping figure, visible but seen by few. Many people then turned in special moments to the inscription which is plainly there at the spot where the statue stands as it is being worked on, but which has been read by few. And yet the inscription is clearly written there, just as clearly as the inscription was once written on the vowed form at Sais. In fact, this inscription is written there: I am the human being. I am the past, the present, and the future. Every mortal should lift my vow. Another person, a visitor, once approached the sleeping figure of the new Isis, and then again and again. And the sleeping Isis considered this visitor her special benefactor and loved him. And one day she believed in a particular illusion. The new Isis had a child, and she considered the visitor whom she looked on as her benefactor to be the father. He regarded himself as the father, but he was not the father. The spirit visitor, who was none other than the new Typhon, believed that he could acquire a special increase of his power in the world if he took possession of the new Isis. So the new Isis had a child, but she did not know its nature. She knew nothing of the being of this new child, and she moved it about. She dragged it far off to other countries because she believed that she must do so. She trowed the new child about, and since she had trowed and dragged it through various regions of the world, it fell into 14 parts through the very power of the world. Thus the new Isis had carried her child into the world, and the world had dismembered it in 14 pieces. When the spirit visitor, the new Typhon, learnt about this, he gathered together the 14 pieces, and with all the profound knowledge of natural science he again made a being, a single whole out of the 14 pieces. But this being contained only mechanical laws, the laws of the machine. Thus a being had arisen with the appearance of life, but with the laws of the machine. And since this being had arisen out of 14 pieces, it could reproduce itself again 14-fold. And Typhon could give a reflection of his own being to each piece, so that each of the 14 children of the new Isis had a countenance that resembled the new Typhon. And Isis watched this strange affair. She could see the complete miraculous change that had come to her child, She knew that she had herself dragged it about, that she had herself brought all this to pass. But there came a day when in its true, its genuine form, she could accept it again from a group of spirits who were the elemental spirits of nature. She could receive it from nature elementals. As she received her true child, which had been turned into the child of Typhon only through an illusion, there dawned upon her a remarkable clairvoyant vision. She suddenly noticed that she still had the cow horns of ancient Egypt in spite of becoming a new Isis. And when she had thus become clairvoyant, the power of her clairvoyance summoned, some say, Typhon himself, some say Mercury. And he was obliged, through the power of the clairvoyance of the new Isis, to set a crown on her head in the place where once the old Isis had the crown, which Horus had seized from her, that is to say, on the spot where she developed the cow horns. But this crown was merely of paper, covered with all sorts of writings of a profoundly scientific nature, but nevertheless of paper. And she now had two crowns on her head, the cow horns and the paper crown, embellished with all the wisdom of profound scientific knowledge. Through the strength of her clairvoyance there one day arose in her the deep meaning, to the extent that it was accessible in that age, of that which is described in St. John's Gospel as the Logos. There arose in her the Johannine significance of the mystery of Golgotha. Through this strength the power of the cow horns grasped the paper crown and changed it into an actual golden crown of genuine substance. These, then, are the main points, my dear friends, that can be told of the new Osiris-Isis legend. I will not, of course, make myself the commentator who explains this Osiris-Isis legend. It is the other Osiris-Isis legend. But it must set one thing definitely before our souls, even though the power of action which is connected with the new Isis statue is only weak, exploring and full of endeavour. It is the beginning of something that is deeply justified in the impulses of the modern age, deeply justified in what this age is meant to become and must become. In recent times we have spoken of how the word has withdrawn from the direct soul experience from which it originally flowed as from a spring. We have seen how we live in the age of abstractions, where people's words and concepts have only an abstract meaning, where human beings stand far removed from reality. The power of the word, the power of the Logos, however, must be captured again. The cow horns of the ancient Isis must take on quite a different form. It is difficult to say such things in modern abstract words. For such things it is better to try to set them before the soul's eye in such imaginations as have been set before you, and to work with these imaginations as imaginations. It is very important for the new Isis to transform the cow horns through the power of the word, which is to be regained through the science of the spirit, so that even the paper crown upon which it has the writing of the newly deeply profound scientific method will become a genuine golden crown. And that is why Rudolf Steiner brought forth anthroposophy, calling it the spiritual science. We don't just work with the scientific, we work with the spirit, and we work with the soul path that we're trying to discover in ourselves. We're trying to develop our souls. And with that we need to understand the ancient myths and how they are working on today. Myths are an important part of our lives. They seem to have been disappearing, but they are coming back, and we must make sure they're never forgotten, and read the true meanings within the myths. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening. May the God and the Goddess walk with you.